The boy is 9 years old. He stands in the inner sanctum of a temple in Carthage, before an altar consecrated to Baal Hammon, god of fire, of sky, of the furnace heat that forges nations. The air is thick with incense. Torchlight throws long shadows across stone walls carved with symbols older than memory.
His father towers beside him, Hamilcar Barca, the man they call Lightning, a general who fought Rome to a standstill in Sicily, a soldier who watched his city surrender not because it was beaten on the battlefield, but because it was broken in the treasury. A patriot who swallowed the ash of a peace he did not lose, and a war indemnity that bled Carthage dry. Hamilcar places his hand on the boy's shoulder. It is heavy, not with cruelty, with purpose. He leads his son to the altar. The fire flickers. The priests watch in silence.
"Place your hand upon the flame," Hamilcar says. "Not close enough to burn, close enough to feel." The boy does not hesitate. "Swear," his father commands. "Swear before the gods of our people that you will never be a friend of Rome." The boy speaks the oath. His name is Hannibal, and he will spend the rest of his life keeping his word. To understand Hannibal, you must first understand what his father built, because Hannibal did not conjure his war against Rome from nothing. He inherited a machine, a strategic vision decades in the making. After the First Punic War, Carthage was crippled. The indemnity imposed by Rome, 3,200 talents of silver paid over 10 years, was staggering. It drained the city's reserves. It forced Carthage to default on payments to its own mercenary armies. And that default triggered a nightmare. In 241 BCE, the same year peace was signed with Rome, Carthage's unpaid mercenaries revolted. 20,000 soldiers, Libyans, Iberians, Gauls, Campanians, men who had fought and bled for Carthage in Sicily, now turned their weapons against the city that refused to pay them. What followed was one of the most savage conflicts of the ancient world. The Greeks called it the Truceless War. Others would call it the Mercenary War. It lasted more than 3 years. It nearly destroyed Carthage entirely. The mercenaries, led by a Libyan soldier named Mathos and a former Carthaginian officer named Spendius, seized towns across North Africa. They besieged Carthage itself. They tortured and killed Carthaginian prisoners. The violence was reciprocal and total. Carthage, when it recaptured rebel soldiers, trampled them to death beneath elephants. It was Hamilcar Barca who ended it. Using a combination of tactical brilliance and merciless efficiency, Hamilcar isolated rebel forces, cut their supply lines, and ground them down in a series of engagements that showcased the very qualities his son would later refine into art. He was not merely a brave commander. He understood logistics, terrain, psychological warfare, and the decisive value of timing. By 237 BCE, the rebellion was crushed. But Carthage was exhausted. Its treasury was empty. Its North African territories were scarred. And now, Rome, sensing opportunity, as Rome always did, made its move. While Carthage bled in Africa, Rome seized Sardinia and Corsica. These were islands Carthage had held for centuries. Rome took them without a battle, without a legitimate pretext, under a transparently cynical threat. Surrender the islands and pay an additional 1,200 talents, or face war. Carthage, broken and bankrupt, could not fight. It submitted.
This was the moment, many historians argue, that made the Second Punic War inevitable. Not Hannibal's oath, not the siege of Saguntum. This, the Roman seizure of Sardinia in a moment of Carthaginian weakness. Even the Greek historian Polybius, no enemy of Rome, called it unjust. He wrote that it was this act, more than any other, that convinced the Barcid family that Rome would never allow Carthage to coexist as an equal power. If Carthage could not be safe in peace, then it must become too strong for Rome to threaten. Hamilcar turned his gaze west, to Iberia. The Iberian Peninsula, modern Spain and Portugal, was, in the 3rd century BCE, a land of extraordinary wealth and extraordinary violence. Its interior was a patchwork of Celtic and Iberian tribes, fiercely independent, constantly warring among themselves. Its coasts had been touched by Phoenician traders for centuries, but the interior was unconquered, wild, rich. Rich above all in silver. The silver mines of southeastern Iberia were among the most productive in the ancient Mediterranean. Whoever controlled them controlled a river of wealth. And wealth, in the ancient world, was the prerequisite to military power. Hamilcar understood this with perfect clarity. In 237 BCE, he crossed to Iberia with an army, his political allies, and his family, including the 9-year-old Hannibal. His mission was not mere conquest. It was the construction of a new power base, a Carthaginian empire in the west that would generate the revenue, recruit the soldiers, and build the infrastructure necessary for an eventual reckoning with Rome. It was, in essence, a family enterprise. Historians call it the Barcid Project. For 8 years, Hamilcar campaigned across southern and eastern Iberia. He defeated tribal coalitions, founded settlements, secured mines, and forged alliances, sometimes through diplomacy, sometimes through marriage, always through a combination of military force and political intelligence. He built an army that was not merely Carthaginian, but multinational. Libyan infantry, Numidian cavalry, Iberian warriors, Balearic slingers, bound not to Carthage the city, but to the Barca family. And through all of this, Hannibal watched. Hannibal learned. He learned how to command men of different languages, different customs, different fighting styles. He learned that loyalty was not given, it was earned through shared hardship, through visible courage, through the knowledge that the general ate what his soldiers ate and slept where they slept. He learned terrain. He learned supply. He learned the art of reading an enemy's weakness before the battle began. He was being forged. In 229 BCE, Hamilcar Barca drowned during a battle in Iberia. Accounts differ on the precise circumstances. Some say he was crossing a river in retreat, covering his son's escape. Others say he fell in an ambush. What is clear is that he died as he had lived, in the field, sword in hand, building the instrument of Carthage's revenge. Command passed to his son-in-law, Hasdrubal the Fair. Hasdrubal the Fair was a different kind of leader than Hamilcar. Where Hamilcar had been a soldier first, Hasdrubal was a diplomat. He consolidated the Barcid position in Iberia, not primarily through war, but through negotiation, trade, and urban development. His greatest achievement was the founding of Carthage, New Carthage. The Romans would call it Carthago Nova. We know it today as Cartagena. Built on a peninsula jutting into a natural harbor on Iberia's southeastern coast, New Carthage became the capital of Barcid Iberia.
It was a city designed for both commerce and war. Its harbor could shelter an entire fleet. Its hinterland gave access to the richest silver mines on the peninsula, and its fortifications made it nearly impregnable from the sea. It was Carthage reborn in the west, a statement of intent. Hasdrubal also negotiated a critical agreement with Rome, the Ebro Treaty, sometime around 226 BCE. The essence was this: Carthage agreed not to cross the Ebro River under arms. In exchange, Rome implicitly recognized Carthaginian dominance south of that line. It was a pragmatic arrangement. Rome was consumed with a different threat: Gallic invasions from the north. Hasdrubal wanted time to build, time to consolidate. The arrangement held for a while. In 221 BCE, Hasdrubal the Fair was assassinated, stabbed by a Celtic servant, reportedly in revenge for the execution of a tribal chief. The army in Iberia did not wait for instructions from Carthage.
By acclamation, by the roar of soldiers who had watched him grow from a boy to a man in their camps, they proclaimed their new commander, Hannibal Barca, 25 years old. The Carthaginian Senate in the capital confirmed the appointment, though not without dissent. There was a political faction in Carthage, led by a nobleman named Hanno the Great, that had always opposed the Barcid enterprise. Hanno argued that the Barcas were building a personal kingdom in Iberia, that they were dangerously autonomous, that their ambitions would drag Carthage into a war it could not win. He was not entirely wrong about any of these things. But the Barcid faction held sway, and Hannibal took command. He moved immediately. In his first 2 years, he launched aggressive campaigns into central Iberia, pushing Carthaginian control further than either his father or brother-in-law had managed. He defeated the Olcades, then the Vacaei, powerful tribal confederations of the interior. These were not mere raids. They were systematic campaigns of subjugation, designed to secure Carthage's western flank and, crucially, to blood his army. Because Hannibal was building more than territory. He was building a weapon. His army by 220 BCE was a remarkable instrument. Its core was Libyan infantry, disciplined, professional soldiers equipped in a style that blended Carthaginian and Greek traditions, capable of fighting in close formation with long spears or swords. Around this core were layers of specialist troops, Numidian light cavalry from North Africa, the finest horsemen in the Western Mediterranean, who could harry, scout, and pursue with devastating effectiveness. Iberian infantry, fierce and experienced in close-quarters mountain warfare. Balearic slingers from the islands off Iberia's east coast, whose accuracy with lead bullets was legendary. They could strike a man in the head at 100 paces. And elephants. The North African forest elephant, smaller than the Indian elephant, now extinct, trained for war. They were not invincible weapons. They could be panicked, turned against their own lines, but used correctly, as shock troops, as psychological weapons against soldiers who had never faced them, they were terrifying. Hannibal drilled these disparate forces into a cohesive army. He trained them to respond to his signals, to execute complex maneuvers, to trust one another across barriers of language and culture. He led from the front. He shared their privations. Ancient sources, even those hostile to Carthage, record that Hannibal often slept on the ground among his soldiers, wrapped in a military cloak, indistinguishable from a common infantryman. The soldiers loved him for it, and he was ready to use them. On the eastern coast of Iberia, south of the Ebro River, stood a city called Saguntum. It sat on a hill, well fortified, overlooking the coastal plain. Its people were Iberians, probably of mixed Iberian and Greek heritage, and it was prosperous,
controlling trade routes along the coast. It was, by any geographic measure, well within the Carthaginian sphere of influence, as defined by the Ebro Treaty. But Saguntum had a relationship with Rome. The nature of that relationship is one of the most debated questions in the history of the Second Punic War. Was Saguntum a formal Roman ally, entitled to Roman protection? Or was it merely a city with informal ties, a friendly contact, but not a treaty partner? The ancient sources disagree. Modern historians remain divided. What is certain is this: Rome chose to treat its relationship with Saguntum as a line in the sand. The crisis began to build in 220 BCE. Saguntum, perhaps emboldened by its Roman connection, began provoking conflicts with neighboring Iberian tribes who were Carthaginian allies. These tribes appealed to Hannibal. Saguntum refused his mediation and appealed directly to Rome. Rome sent ambassadors to Hannibal's camp. They warned him not to interfere with Saguntum, invoking the Ebro Treaty. This was, to Hannibal's mind, an absurdity bordering on insult. Saguntum was south of the Ebro, well within the zone the treaty had recognized as Carthaginian. Rome was attempting to use a single allied city as a wedge to deny Carthage authority in its own territory. It was, he believed, the same pattern that had played out with Sardinia and Corsica. Rome exploiting any pretext to constrain, diminish, and ultimately destroy Carthaginian power. Hannibal sent messengers to Carthage, laying out the situation and seeking authorization. The Barcid faction backed him. Hanno counseled caution. The war party prevailed. In the spring of 219 BCE, Hannibal marched on Saguntum. The siege of Saguntum was not a quick affair. The city was built on a high, rocky promontory, its walls thick, its defenders determined. The Saguntines knew what a Carthaginian conquest would mean: the loss of their independence, the absorption of their city into the Barcid Empire. They fought with the fury of a people fighting for their survival. And they were waiting for Rome. Hannibal arrived before the walls with a large force and immediately set about the reduction of the city. He employed siege towers, battering rams, and mining operations. The Saguntines responded with sorties, with fire, with desperate counterattacks that targeted Hannibal personally. In one assault, Hannibal was struck in the thigh by a javelin while leading troops too close to the walls. The wound was serious enough to force him from the field for weeks. But he did not withdraw. He delegated command during his recovery and maintained the siege without interruption. Weeks became months. The siege stretched through the summer of 219, into the autumn, and through the winter. 8 months. 8 months of grinding, relentless pressure. Inside the walls, Saguntum starved. The Saguntines sent repeated appeals to Rome. They begged for intervention, for an army, for a fleet, for anything. Rome sent nothing. This is one of the most striking facts of the Saguntum crisis. Despite treating Saguntum as a protectorate worth warning Hannibal over, Rome did not send a single soldier to defend it. Both consuls for 219 BCE were occupied elsewhere. Whether Rome genuinely believed Hannibal would not dare attack, or whether the Senate calculated that the fall of Saguntum would provide a superior cause for war, more politically useful than a negotiated peace, remains an open question. The effect was the same. Saguntum was abandoned. In late 219 BCE, after approximately 8 months, Saguntum fell. The end was apocalyptic. Ancient sources describe scenes of extraordinary defiance and despair. The Saguntines, rather than surrender, are said to have built a great fire in the center of their city and thrown their valuables into the flames to deny them to the conqueror.
Many citizens threw themselves into the fire after their possessions. Whether these accounts are literally true or embellished by Roman historians seeking to cast Hannibal as a destroyer of civilization, the message is clear. Saguntum did not submit. It was destroyed. Hannibal took the city. The surviving population was enslaved. The plunder was distributed among his soldiers and sent to Carthage. And then he waited. He waited to see what Rome would do. In the spring of 218 BCE, a Roman embassy arrived in Carthage. The delegation was led by Quintus Fabius Maximus, a senior senator, a man of enormous gravity, whose own destiny in this war was yet to be written. The Roman demands were blunt. Surrender Hannibal and his senior officers to Roman justice for the destruction of Saguntum, or accept that a state of war existed between Rome and Carthage. The Carthaginian Senate debated. Hanno the Great argued for compliance, argued that Hannibal had acted recklessly, that the Barcid faction had hijacked Carthaginian foreign policy, that war with Rome was suicidal madness. His arguments were cogent. They were also irrelevant. The Barcid faction held the balance of power. Surrender Hannibal? It would mean surrendering the army, the mines, the Iberian Empire, Carthage's future. It was unthinkable. The Carthaginian Senate refused Rome's demands, but they did so with evasive language, arguing technicalities, debating whether the Ebro Treaty actually covered Saguntum, questioning Rome's standing to make demands. Fabius Maximus had no patience for legal argument. The Roman senator gathered the folds of his toga into a bundle before the assembled Carthaginian Senate. "In this fold," he said, "I carry both peace and war. I will let fall whichever you choose." The Carthaginian senators answered, "Give us whichever you choose." Fabius let the fold drop. "Then I give you war." "We accept it," the Carthaginians replied, "and we will wage it with the same spirit." It was done. The Second Punic War, the war that would determine the fate of the Mediterranean world, had begun. Not with a battle, but with a gesture. A fold of cloth released. Now, consider the strategic situation as Hannibal saw it in the spring of 218 BCE. Rome was the dominant military power in the central Mediterranean. Its population, including its Italian allies, gave it access to a manpower pool that dwarfed anything Carthage could marshal. Modern estimates suggest Rome could call upon somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 men of military age across the Italian peninsula. Rome controlled the sea, or at least could contest it anywhere. A direct maritime assault on Italy was beyond Carthaginian capability. Rome's Italian alliance system, the network of Latin colonies, allied cities, and subject peoples, provided soldiers, supplies, and strategic depth. Even if one part of Italy was invaded, others could continue to resist. Any conventional strategic analysis would conclude that Carthage could not win a direct war against Rome. Hannibal's plan was not conventional. His strategy rested on a single radical insight. Rome's power was not Roman. It was Italian. Rome's legions were devastating because they were reinforced and replenished by hundreds of allied communities. Destroy the legions alone, and Rome would simply raise more. But destroy the legions and break the alliance system? Convince Rome's Italian allies that Rome could no longer protect them, that the Roman yoke was not worth bearing, and the entire structure would collapse. Rome without Italy was a city. A single city on the Tiber, powerful in name, powerless in fact. To achieve this, Hannibal needed to bring the war to Italy itself. He needed to appear with an army, defeat Roman forces decisively, repeatedly, spectacularly.
and demonstrate to every allied city that Rome was not invincible. But how do you get an army to Italy when you don't control the sea? You walk.
Hannibal's plan was to march his army overland from Iberia, across southern Gaul, and over the Alps into the Po Valley of northern Italy, a distance of roughly 1,500 miles through hostile territory, across two major mountain ranges, through the lands of Gallic tribes who might be friendly, neutral, or violently opposed. It had never been done. No Mediterranean army had ever crossed the Alps as a fighting force. The logistical challenges alone were almost inconceivable, feeding tens of thousands of men, plus horses, plus pack animals, plus war elephants, through mountains where no supply infrastructure existed. But the very impossibility of it was the point. Rome would not expect it, could not prepare for it. It was the kind of plan that is either genius or insanity. The difference would be determined by execution. Through the winter of 219-218 BCE, Hannibal prepared. He sent advance agents into Gaul, making contact with Celtic tribes, negotiating passage, identifying routes. The Gauls of the Po Valley, the Boii and the Insubres, had recently revolted against Roman colonization and were eager for an ally. They sent word back, "Come." He secured his base. He sent forces to North Africa, stationed his brother Hasdrubal in Iberia to hold the peninsula and protect the silver mines. He moved Iberian troops to Africa and African troops to Iberia. Soldiers far from home are soldiers who depend on their commander. He gathered supplies. He mapped routes. He calculated distances. He was not a gambler. He was an engineer of war. The numbers, recorded by Polybius, who claims to have read Hannibal's own inscription on a bronze tablet in southern Italy, are as follows: approximately 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants. Not all of them would make the march. Hannibal knew this. The army that arrived in Italy would be a fraction of the force that departed Spain. But it would be enough. It had to be. In late May, or early June of 218 BCE, Hannibal Barca led his army out of New Carthage and turned north. He was 28 years old. Behind him, he left a city built on his family's ambition and Iberian silver. Behind him, he left the sea, and with it, any easy road home. Behind him, he left the world as it was. Rome ascendant, Carthage diminished. The Mediterranean order settled and seemingly permanent. Ahead of him lay the Pyrenees. Beyond them, the vast river plains of Gaul. Beyond them, the Rhone, wide and swift. And beyond the Rhone, rising like the wall at the edge of the world, the Alps. He carried with him an army of Libyans, Iberians, Numidians, Gauls, and Balearic islanders, men who spoke a dozen languages, worshipped a dozen gods, and followed a single commander. He carried 37 elephants across a continent. He carried the oath of a 9-year-old boy, now tempered into the purpose of a man. He carried war to Rome's door. The Romans did not yet know he was coming. They would learn soon enough.